I'd like to welcome everybody back for part three of our interview with the wonderful Jamie Owen from UCF Student Legal Services. And Jamie, we were just getting into the fun stuff here in terms of questions, and want to thank you again for joining us on this. Um, our next question was inspirations. Jamie, can you share with us some of your inspirations?
I don't know if I have any current inspirations in at least the legal field. I know, when I went to law school, like everybody else, you want to be the next notorious RBG and do good in the world. And I don't know if I ever wanted to make a name for myself. I don't have that kind of um, ego, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But I've never really wanted to be, John Morgan or Dan Newlin. I don't know if you guys have Dan Newlin up in Orlando or up in Gainesville, but he's a pretty big personal injury type attorney here in billboards in Central Florida. And so, that's never really been kind of, I don't want to be a household name necessarily. But I wanted to do good, and so those were kind of like the initial, the good Marshall, all of these really, big icons, kind of through some of the civil rights struggles, um, in the mid 1900s that were going on and still going on, and so that was probably some of the people I was thinking of when, I was thinking about going to law school. But now I don't know if there's anybody who neatly fits into being, um, an inspiration for me. I have a really good mentor. Who is the advocacy director for Florida Rural Legal Services, um, Roberto Cruz, who continues to help me out from time to time. Um, and kind of keeps it real. And I appreciate that. My clients, I think, some of the clients that um, some of the things that they're trying to do, or um, trying to accomplish, and being able to help them, and know that sometimes for something that might not be as big of a deal for you or I, really could be devastating for them and might stop their progress towards their degree. um, just financial issues. And so being able to hopefully keep them on track and keep them going, and hopefully get a good um, career after, make lots of money and remember the little guy. It's what I say to a lot of them. So that's kind of what what keeps me um, going. But this is a difficult profession, and sometimes it can be hard. There's no linear progression. It's not like. Um,
Yeah. Let me follow that question
mhm,
up then. Thank you for sharing that.
mhm,
And certainly, yeah, very noble, I think,
mhm,
inspirations that you have.
mhm,
And I hope that those are,
yeah,
inspirations for all my students
mhm,
here. Kind of segueing into
mhm.
the next, you were talking about some of the difficulties. Can you give us any special advice from your unique perspective, Jamie?
I don't know if I have any sort of special advice, but um, if you are, this is kind of what I tell everybody who wants to go to law school, beyond like the academics and choosing the right place for you and LSAT and all that sort of good stuff, is that um, this is a hard profession. I don't think a lot of people outside of our niche necessarily get all of the statistics. And I'll renew. We had to refilm some of this, so I'll renew my content warning where I talked about previously that I'm going to be talking about substance abuse and suicide, and some of those issues. But lawyers don't rank well on some of those factors. I have some kind of older statistics, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're higher now, given the stress and a lot of the trauma that's happened to communities and all of the things that happened in 2020 and are continuing on in 2021. But, like 1/3 of lawyers basically report problematic drinking behaviors. And when you are in law school, it's presumed you're of age. Vast majority of people are going to be over 21 in law school. I think one person in my class um, was a little bit younger than me, but I was one of the youngest people in my particular cohort, and I was over 21. So, there's beer and wine, there's bar review at most schools on like a Thursday night where you can go in and maybe have drink specials if you're with the group, and there's some pretty heavy drinking at some of those events. When you go to a meet and greet or mingle with law firms or anything like that, the beer and wine is there. If you go to a CLE or any sort of event like that, there's usually a cash bar. It's just everywhere. Um, and plenty of people abuse substances beyond that. I've never worked with the people who've had the kind of money to abuse some of those more expensive
Right,
substances.
right.
But certainly there are, people who are doing, much worse than that, or prescription drugs, uppers that get you through the day and downers that get you to sleep at night. Um, that's all really a part of the profession. I think it's I saw a statistic, and I'm not sure how, again, it's a little dated, but it's the 11th highest profession for death by suicide. And it's not, a lot of times when you read about people who have died by suicide, um, it's not newbies or people who you think are struggling to break into the profession, and have student loans and stuff like that. It's sometimes people who have been practicing, and people who are respected in the careers. It's not necessarily unusual to hear well-known name so and so, who's in their mid to late career, um, you know had died. And so that's something like that. So I really think that as you're an adolescent, most, if people are, and I know not all college students are, I don't know what the statistics are at UF, but actually it's a small percentage of our undergrads who are traditional 18 to 22-year-olds. Certainly, part of our cohort, but definitely we have a lot of students who are older than that. But that's a time for a lot of issues to emerge. I personally, um, you know, in undergrad and then through law school, um, started experiencing depression and anxiety in a way I hadn't before. And then when I entered the profession, I had a pretty tough job and pretty tough circumstances, and just a lot of other non-professional things were also going on at the same time. And I really struggled with anxiety. And one, you have to know how to ask for help, but two, it's also really good to build your foundation. So, um, this profession, you know, there's just so many things that go on with it that I think sometimes people don't understand. And it's going to depend on what you end up doing. But you're an attorney, and then depending on what sort of clients you have, I think, Layne, for the most part, you've always represented individuals, and myself as well. When you're planning someone's estate, or you're helping somebody with their divorce, or you're dealing with one of the other things, you're not dealing with business professionals. If you're dealing with business professionals, that might be a whole different issue and stressors. But the vast majority of attorneys are going to deal with individuals who are in their individual problems. It's a lot of compassion fatigue. It's a lot of, if you've worked with people who are poor or poverty adjacent, um, It's a almost like a social work component to that. They don't train you this in law school. They don't even train you how to interview a client in law school. A lot of that stuff you have to develop as you're going through it. Um, and then so there's all of those issues with dealing with other people. Then there's the professional side of that and making sure that you're um, meeting your professional obligations and that you're hitting deadlines and you're doing the work and the research and you're doing the right thing and you're giving the right advice. And um, I've never had the luxury of specializing in a particular area of law. I've always been kind of like a civil generalist. So it takes a long time to start to feel comfortable, with a lot of different subject areas, and not constantly be worried you're telling somebody the wrong thing, not constantly be worried you're blowing a statute of limitations. How long ago was this thing? All that sort of stuff. So that's a lot of stress. I still have that moment, like someone came into me a while ago and this issue happened a while before then. Like
Oh, you
sometimes
wake
I'll
up in the
have to
middle of
like
the night, right? Statute
rush
of
and look.
limitations,
Oh,
right?
I that
Exactly.
actually happened to me at my old job. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was terrified that I had, well, one, it wasn't something we handled anyway, but hadn't given the person the right advice. And so I had to go and was worried that somehow they were going to blow the statute of limitations. So I had to go look it up in the middle of the night so I could go back to sleep. Um,
And
and that
that's
happens.
And that happens exactly, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's so important. And in fact, remind me. I need to put
Hmm.
links right below this
Hmm.
video, probably for the
Hmm.
students, right, that are
Yeah.
maybe needing a little bit of advice or help along those lines. Is
Yeah.
it? Yeah, and I just
So,
think it's so important. I mean, they can reach out to us
hmm
because we've been through a
hmm
lot of things. We're not obviously professional
you
mental
know,
health counselors, but
hmm
um,
and
certainly
and
from the perspective, right?
yeah, and and I think there's things changing in our profession. So I don't know if I believe this has changed, but I remember when I was doing the character and fitness part of the bar here in Florida, there is a part about mental health where you have to disclose. And that's like I really wrestled with what I disclose on that, because I had some therapy, but I'd never been diagnosed with anything at that point. Um, so it was it's and there's stigma, and really there's nothing wrong with therapy. If therapy is a wonderful tool, it teaches you how to deal with things, um, situations. So, sometimes you might just need some therapy if, let's say, one of the things is you're having problems, becoming an adult with your parents and drawing boundaries. I think a lot of people struggle with that. And, you can maybe go have a couple discrete sessions with CAPS or which is our counseling and psychological services here in campus. I'm not sure what they call it there at UF.
Counseling and Wellness Center,
Mhm.
yeah, and
So you can do that, and I think there's even a support group here for issues like that. But then also, outside of campus, there's that. But that's something of a privilege when you're a student. You have access on campus. I think every single campus is going to have some sort of mental health thing because it's such a big thing for students. But when you're out in the community, it can be pricey. And then, but I don't know how good they are, and I'm not endorsing them in any way whatsoever, but I know there's programs like BetterHelp and some of the other ones that have come out to kind of help address that need. Um, but it's really important, and this has kind of become more of a mantra of mine recently, is to find something that nourishes you. What is it that really nourishes the essence of you? And I don't mean your professional life, or I don't mean Jamie the attorney or Jamie the wife or Jamie the dog mom. I mean my internal sense of self, and doing that. And you have to be careful, because I know sometimes in this world of, we talk a lot about self-care, that it can, when you are having a lot of stress and anxiety, it can be very easy to use something that normally would be healthy as a crutch. And I am guilty of that 110%. And you can become just as unhealthy about that crutch, you know, as you are about that. So, um, for me, for a long time, it was, um, diet and exercise. I don't think I ever crossed the line where it was really,
I
into, bad, but it was things that was like I had to be very rigid about this thing because this was something I could control when
I
nothing else was going right.
Yeah, there was something that you said to me, about
Mhm.
all of this, and it's an inward reflection that we
Mhm.
need to do.
Mhm.
And I know the message that you're telling us is so important. And our remember we were talking about Dr.
Mhm.
Peterson. I believe Rule 6, right, is set
Mhm.
your house in perfect order before you
Mhm.
criticize the world.
Mhm.
And what I had heard, this is an individual, we're going to get into your favorite books as well, Jamie. This
Mhm.
individual had read 300 books, and
Mhm.
his rule number one was get yourself right. Okay, and what he meant from that was that your brain, the chatter,
Mhm.
it could be biochemical, it could be situational, but until you get yourself right, you certainly can't go helping other people,
Mm-mm.
right? And that self-care, Jamie, that's something that I think that it's the
Mm.
hardest thing in the world for attorneys
Mhm.
sometimes, right? To turn the spotlight on ourselves.
Oh yeah, and I think um I don't know if this was always true, but you know, we now have access to every single case that's ever been published, basically, right? And so it can be really hard to know when to stop.
Yeah.
When you have the answer, when you have the right answer. Um, and I know that was something I struggled with a lot at the beginning of my career, and as a law student, it was like, when have you done enough? Did you miss the really important case that might just totally sink your argument? Um, and there's probably been times I've done that as a professional, that I missed the case or missed the point. Um, you know, you can get bogged down in the minutia. I had a case recently where I don't think the judge made the correct ruling on a very discrete point. Um, it was summary judgment, but I believe that there was a dispute in the facts. But at least for this one section of the case, and um, but in the larger scheme, they probably were indeed responsible for more money than they weren't, and continuing to fight it would just drive up attorney fees and stuff like that. So, if you get really bogged down in that minutia of that one point and stuff, you can't see the forest for the trees. And I think that to circle back to something where we talked about when I talked about my pet peeves is the people who can't get perspective. Like, that's one of the things that if you have perspective, that's what you can see. If you get really overly involved in your client's argument about why dad is so awful and the kids never should be, with him, you might not be able to get that perspective. And like, there's no you'll see a lot of things where people say self-care, all sorts of different things, exercise, but it really can be anything. It could be your faith community. It could be,
True.
um,
Yes.
you know, uh, baking something new every week, if that's your
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
Um,
Oh, Jamie, 1 second.
mhm.
I'm going to pause it for just a second to wash my
Okay.
hands. Thank you. Okay, and back again, Jamie. Thank you for yeah, very brief break, intermission there. And Jamie, we were talking about the individual that read 300 books. Remember, had this
Hmm.
advice. Um, I think what I really like about you is you're a Renaissance person, and
Haha.
you read more than 300 books, of course. And your undergrad, you were an
Hmm.
English literature major, right? So,
Oh, yes.
so
Jack of all trades, master of none.
no, this is interesting because we're
Hmm.
going to talk about movies and TV shows, and are
Hmm.
you a fan of Boston Legal or things like
No,
Law and
I
Order?
mean, I've
Or
only seen, well, obviously I've seen lots of Law and Order. Who
sure,
hasn't? So that's the
sure,
only thing that's on. But no, I don't really like stuff that involves attorneys. I
yeah,
just
no, fair
no.
enough, fair enough. Let me
I've
know. Yeah, no, exactly. No, and
Yeah.
it's not realistic for us or not in the world that we're in, right? It's not a murder every week, right?
No, and and then everything gets wrapped up in a tiny little package.
Yeah, it's nice,
Obviously
right?
it's much more complicated, and sometimes as an attorney you get frustrated by some of those shows. But I just, one of my self-care things is that when I put my 45 hours or whatever it is a week, sometimes 40, sometimes 50, who knows. Um, you know, eh,
50 to
uh,
60, I know. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and then you're
or
thinking about
sometimes,
cases,
right.
in the shower as you're cooking dinner, you spend a lot of time, mental energy beyond just what you clock in. Um, that you know, I just don't want like if I pick up a book and one of the characters is like a police officer or an attorney or someone involved in the justice system, I am just like, no, thank you.
So
Um,
yeah, no, Jamie, yeah, no, I totally understand that. My students always say, how often, how many hours a week do you work? And it's 50 to 60, pretty typical. And the question is, are we working efficiently, productively? You and I know we could do it 24/7, right?
well,
I mean,
yeah.
you could completely immerse yourself in this
Mhm.
job and the work.
Yeah, and you probably could do. I think I'd be more productive in like a 4-day week than I am in a 5-day week
Yeah, the
because
4/10s or four
yeah,
twelves
or
or
or even
whatever
just
it is.
like 32 hours because you have more of a time crunch. But when you sometimes you don't, and then it's like that rabbit hole with the research and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Once you get going in that flow state, right, you can accomplish
mm,
amazing things too. Let
yeah.
me ask you, JV,
hmm
favorite books. Give me some of your great recommendations.
I mean, um, it's hard to say what my favorite book is. Probably if I had to pick one, and this predates the TV show, um, that I would say Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
That was one that I read, maybe a little young, but it had a pretty big impact on some of my thinking. And I actually even have a quote from it on one of my tattoos. So definitely was very into that. I had the fortune of
I,
meeting her at some point and getting a signed copy. So that's one of my
wow.
treasured possessions,
I'm
Um,
sure she sounds when I hear the
mhm,
interviews, with her like a very beautiful person,
mhm,
is the way that I would describe it.
mhm.
Very compassionate, a lot of empathy. Did you feel?
Yeah, kind of, it's been so many years ago now since that happened. But
Right, TV
um,
show and everything else, right?
yeah, oh yeah,
But
and nobody's perfect. I think there's some very valid criticisms of some of her work, and um, putting that English
I,
literature major hat on again. But I think if you go through her work, she picks up on some things that we maybe see, and she wrote that I think in the 80s, and so that it continued to resonate to the point where it was made into an ongoing TV show for Hulu is
yeah.
something, she hit on something there. um
Well, Jamie, we know, thank
mhm,
goodness, it's an alternate universe, and that we do not live in a dystopian world with declining
mhm.
fertility rates and sperm count.
Well,
That
maybe. I mean, I think there's some discussion
right?
of
That would
whether or not.
never ever happen, right? In
Yes,
the in the
I
Western world, right?
I think there's some
Um,
discussion about shrinking populations that has happened in a number of countries, but
yeah, yeah.
the overall population seems to keep going up.
Right, right, right. It's
Mhm,
the interesting thing to me is I remember hearing this and I want to get your take on it, but when they asked Margaret Atwood, did she
mhm,
consider it to be a feminist novel? One of the
mhm,
responses I thought, and I don't want to misquote her, but it was that she didn't think of it that way. She thought it was a novel for humanity. And really what I call the concerned literature, like concerned
mhm.
cinema, concerned literature, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I
maybe
think
a
there's
warning, right?
yeah, yeah, and I think So one of the passages in the book that I like, and it's actually part of what's on my body, is the thing that I always go back to, is that um, that they lived in the gaps between like the stories in the newspaper. Um, and so I think it's very easy, especially if you're a person of privilege, to kind of just go about your day-to-day life and ignore some of the things that are going on around you. And I think at least in the novel, I've not watched the TV show. I'm not someone who has attention span too much these days to sit down and consume a lot of TV shows. It's bad, but I don't watch a lot of movies or TV. Um, but I think it's kind of wasn't just that this happens to women and this is what's happening to women, but it was what was happening to all of society, and it was and how it happened. And I'm sure there's parallels that people could draw between all sorts of things in a novel and things that current events. um but it was definitely um obviously the main character is a woman, um and kind of describes what um, she went through as kind of this new government emerged, and then her role um, as a handmaid in that. So, that's kind of interesting, but it's kind of, it leaves you with hope. I
Yeah.
love a good dystopian novel. I love a good high fantasy. Like N.K. Jemisin is another one that I have read. Her Broken Earth trilogy is really good. It takes a little bit of time um, because she writes from a unique perspective to kind of get into the narrative structure. And she does that very purposefully. But for someone who's used to more mainstream narrative structures, it definitely can take a little bit to get into. Um, and I'm excited for her that I think it's being developed into a movie now. Um,
I wanted to, gosh, I want to go down this path so
mhm,
much. I was going to mention when I was
mhm,
younger, Ursula Le Guin's The Lake of
mhm,
Heaven, right,
mhm,
was an amazing, and not just talking, her themes also include the idea of consciousness
mhm,
and that quantum kind of consciousness where you're creating, as
mhm,
things go on, the movement, of time. And,
mhm.
oh, yeah, quick, did you see The Arrival? Arrival, I guess is the name of the movie.
No.
I think you would. I think it would really resonate if I could do a recommendation,
Yes.
movie recommendation. Because
Okay.
I gotta squeeze something in there, right, Jamie?
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
me. Yeah.
I used to go to the movies all the time. It's just been like I've gotten out of the habit, and I don't know. I With the pandemic and not having to commute, we're getting back to that, but not
Yeah.
having to commute for a while, I had more time, but it felt like I had less time. So
It,
yeah, it's
it,
it's just one of those things.
well, I'm going to hit you up for your Hulu subscription when we finish this.
Mhm.
But let me, closing thoughts, Jamie.
Okay.
You and I have talked about
Mhm.
this amazing right range, and I cannot thank you enough. I think you've talked about student loan debt,
Oh.
depression, right? The mental
Mhm.
health issues in it, substance abuse issues,
Mhm.
as well. What we should look out for. You've given us plenty
Mhm.
of what I would really call warnings, but kind of trigger warnings for life, being a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Closing thoughts. This is the deathbed wisdom that you
Oh,
pass on, right?
um, don't
Uh,
go law school, kids. Um,
yeah.
you know, I I think, I think, um, anybody who's considering law school really needs to do a lot of introspection. If you are an introvert, um, and you get socially drained by having to talk to people a lot, like myself. I'm talking to myself here, to my younger self. Um, you know, there are maybe only a few discrete areas of law that you will be in where you will not have to deal with people constantly. And potentially, be out there and being social and managing social obligations. Um, if, you have to really look into yourself and know if that's, what you kind of are.
I'm sorry, Jamie. I was destroying your line of thought there. I dropped in chat. I don't know if it's showing up on my screen,
Mhm.
but I'm an INFJ. So I'm
I've
an
never
introvert as well.
I've never taken, or at least it's been so long since I've taken one of those ones.
Myers-Briggs type of, yeah,
I
or
don't remember, and I know there's that new one that people use. It's like 1 through 9 or 1 through 8, something like that. But I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert. I can be extroverted when I need to be. Um,
right, because
and
you're so involved with, I know, with our national group and,
mhm,
presenting, keeping us organized basically,
mhm,
as
mhm,
well. So, what I've heard, tell me if this is true, Jamie. This is true for myself. I'm an
mhm,
INFJ. I'm an introvert. And
mhm.
everybody's like, I can't believe, maybe same way for you, Jamie, that we're introverts. But we need time to recharge,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes,
we can be social.
yes.
However, the extrovert can go from one social setting to
Uh,
another, I'm told, right?
mhm.
And they actually gain energy from that. Whereas for you and I, Jamie, it drains
Oh,
energy
yeah.
from
Oh,
us,
yeah.
right? And we need a little bit of me time, right?
Yeah. So today, for example, this is my second meeting,
Oh,
and I have two more after this. So tonight
thank
I'm
you.
gonna just like veg on the couch, I think, and kind of recover. But like if I have a whole day with clients, like I don't do this anymore, but at one time I was doing like 8 appointments a day, back to back, and they could potentially be all filled. A day like that, I would go home and probably like, this was when I still lived alone before I met my husband, but like plop on the bed
Yeah. Oh,
and just
yeah.
like lay there.
Just chill.
Um,
Yep.
and it's in some ways my long commute is nice because I can put on a podcast or some music that I like and listen to that and kind of just like decompress a little bit that I'm in my own little bubble. But yeah, it can be very exhausting, and this job involves a lot of interacting with people. um, so look inside yourself. Know that you really want to do this work. Um, it's not Law and Order. It's the average attorney. It's a lot more drudgery. I mean, and you're often dealing with people, if you're not dealing with corporations, and again, that's a very lucrative but very small percentage of our profession, then you're dealing with people usually at the worst times of their lives. Someone has died, someone they're getting a divorce, they're potentially going to lose their house, they've been sued for a credit card, or they got over their head and they're looking for a bankruptcy. So you're looking at people who might be in crisis, or they were wrongfully terminated from their job, whatever it is. So you're dealing with well, people who are stressed out, and who need compassion and care. um, and if you're a good attorney, that's what you're doing. But not everybody can provide that. It's sometimes is a struggle for me. um Even as a pretty empathetic person, you can get burnt out on it. So you have to know that that's who you are. If you look at the supreme, if people think, I was just talking to someone recently who is going to be entering law school. Not a UCF student, someone else I know. Um, who's going to be entering law school, and they want to do all of these really great things, and it's just tough. Like, you know, um, it can be. There's some luck involved for those people who end up at the ACLU, and
Right.
all of those national organizations who are doing a lot of the really great advocacy work, or whatever it is. If it's Save the Whales, or
Right.
um, sea turtles, or manatees, which have a special place in my heart.
Sure. Yeah, in Florida,
Being a
absolutely.
Florida girl,
Yeah.
whatever it is, um, you know, police reform, justice reform, religious liberty, whatever it is that you're fighting, you want to fight for, um, that, there's a good amount of luck involved in people who end up in those positions. And a lot of times it's not the first thing that they're doing in the profession. It's something they went out and they developed some skills and then were able to leverage them into one of those jobs. So it's not usually um, often first job. A lot of times, there there are some, like, student legal services, that will hire new attorneys, um, if there's an opening, which there's not usually a ton of openings even in our multiple programs across the nation, um, but a lot of them don't. Mine doesn't usually, so you have to break into the career,
Yeah, that's a
somehow.
great topic. When I do the presentations or did
Mhm.
them pre-COVID, in person, looking forward, I guess, again to those days, I would always ask my students, because I would show us, and I can't say, we're
Yeah,
elders or whatever,
you're old
but
folks.
yeah, I know. Well, maybe I
We're
can.
old
Maybe there's
folks
not.
too.
But I know. Yeah, I know. We're yeah. All these what is it? Verboten terms and things, right?
Mhm,
But the reality is experienced,
mhm.
and when I ask them, I said, would it be better to get somebody out of law school or whatever? They always shake their head and they're like, no, 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 Layne. We want people with experience that know what they're doing. Because I always say, would an affinity there, be
Mhm.
closer to you, maybe in age and
The
things like that. But
You
you
know,
know,
I there is something to be said for experience. I had a lot to learn, even though I'd been an attorney for a couple years when I came to UCF, and I've gotten a little bit more rust on me since then, or seasoning. But
seasoning. Yeah.
seasoning
Right.
um, feels like rust some days. But it was a little rough this morning. There's also something to be said. There is a colleague of ours. I won't name her just in case she doesn't want to be named or known for this.
Being outed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
where she actually did hire someone directly out of law school, because she wanted to mold her the way she wanted her. So there is something for that. I will say that's difficult. Right now, I'm I have our my assistant didn't come from the legal field, and so um, I'm training her. A lot of that she started just before COVID, so it's like it's been really tough. She's doing a good job. But there's she would probably be in a different place if we would have been in the office together, and there's just a hurdle. And when you've been doing this job for a while, sometimes um, I just sent something over to a student who's working on a project with me, and I think I've boiled it down to something very readable and understandable for the lay communities we call non-lawyers. But um, I don't always know that. So it's definitely a learning curve, and getting over the nerves of puking before your first trial.
Yep.
Sure did.
Absolutely. Yep.
Sure did.
I
I
totally
was a
understand.
nervous wreck. It was not it was a small claims case. Like, it wasn't really that big of a deal, but I was
No
so
jury, no murder, anything like
no
that, right? Right.
jury, not criminal, nobody was going to jail.
Okay.
Um, there were some other factors going on where there was another person involved that had actually spent time in jail for murder. Um,
Oh, okay. Okay. A
so there
little bit
was
of
some,
drama there, right?
yeah, there was some,
Yeah.
it's never cut and dry, just, go in and try this thing. And I won. Um, but, it was, it's totally stressful when you get past that. And we don't go to trial too much here at UCF for various reasons, but
Well,
you kind of
yeah.
have to get past that. Your negotiation skills,
Right.
um, knowing the little ins and outs of, like, okay, like that case I was talking about. If we press this, you know, it's probably going to take so many months given the way the dockets are. Plus, you think of the amount of the hours if this goes to trial, like at the end of the day at 250 an hour paying attorney's fees to the other side, is this going to be worth fighting over this small part of this bigger thing? So you know you don't know that when you first come out of law school. So, there's just like a lot of things, and I'm learning stuff all the time. I learn new
It,
things all the time.
Jamie, it's so interesting. I know we need to wrap up, but I'm so
Hmm.
tempted to ask you, in terms of management, how
Hmm.
can we keep student legal services attorneys happy? I
Hmm.
am so ready. I'm saying 6.3 years for me, right? I would love to turn this torch over, right? To
um,
the next group, to carry it and to take over
oh.
here. But, how do we keep student legal services happy? We don't want to lose this talent because, honestly,
Mhm.
Jamie, and I've told everybody this, we lose an attorney out of this office, and it's 6 to 12 months if we're lucky getting somebody else up to speed, which is
Mhm.
huge. We've only got 4 attorneys, right? So we're
Yeah.
going to be down not just 25%, we're going to have the other attorney training that attorney, right? Bringing them on
Yeah,
board.
and for anyone who's not familiar with state hiring, just to give you some background for when I was hired for my position here. Now it was a little different because it was a brand new position. They had only had 3 attorneys, and then they brought me on as a fourth. So it did take a little bit longer than that. I applied the last day that the job was open because at the time this looked like a general counsel job, which I was not really qualified for. I had the pedigree for it because I went to
Yeah,
Northwestern,
you do have the pedigree.
but
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd been working for legal services, doing disability advocacy and all that sort of stuff. So but the description was strange, and I actually had met my boss and my fellow, the other civil attorney who's been here a long time, but I didn't put two and two together. But then I heard the grapevine, fortunately, that this was what this was, and so I applied. I didn't hear anything until the week after Thanksgiving when I actually was in bed with the flu. Donna, who's our office manager, called and asked me if I was still interested, and I had to have her repeat herself because I was so out of it. And I was like, "Oh, that's a terrible first impression." I did the interview because of the nature of this job. There was a presentation involved with that. Um, right before Christmas. I didn't start until April 20th. So that kind of gives you, it was almost a year long process, and things move slow here at UCF, and our office moves slow. We don't hire people very often. So there's always a learning curve every single time we have to hire someone. Something's changed. Even for student staff, it feels like, and we hire them a lot more often than anybody else. So, it just takes a long time with state hiring, and I think sometimes you might lose some talent
Yeah,
um, because
yeah.
of that. People who are looking to move on have done so. Sorry, my dog is singing the song of its people, and somebody must be here. Maybe a delivery.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah. I'm
so,
I'm
so if
sorry
you
about
hear
that.
barking, that is what it is. I think my husband's trying to get him to calm down.
I
Um,
no.
but I think that's part of it. I think part of it is, and this varies from programs. I can only speak to my program. I've been fortunate that I've had some raises come up, but you know, there were some benefits to the previous job. They didn't have to pay for. They have to pay for here. I have to pay for parking, which is almost $400 a year. Um, and that sort of stuff that can be a little, um, it's kind of like a pay cut in a
It
way because you're
Yeah,
paying
yeah,
for
yeah,
that.
exactly. You're paying
Um,
so much, I know for that. I
mhm,
always feel like it's just a big cycle,
mhm,
that now with Ellie going to UF, right? My salary would
mhm.
just get shunted right back to university again,
Oh
right?
yeah, your
But that's what
daughter.
money, yeah, that's
Yeah,
what money does, right? It goes in a big cycle, right?
circles.
Big
You're
circle.
supporting, you're putting back
This
into it.
wonderful
She can
fine
tell all of her new
institution.
friends that
Exactly.
there's a
Yeah.
student legal services. Our supervisor of our office is son's
I,
going to be starting at UCF, and I'm like, make sure he tells all of his friends about our office. um,
Exactly right. And hopefully not a frequent flyer, right?
no,
Yeah,
no.
here like
Mhm.
we talked about, yeah,
Yeah.
before. But yeah, I just
So
oh, go ahead, Jamie. Sorry.
I mean, I think sometimes it's just the nature of the profession. I don't really have anything wisdom to say on that, but if you look at the statistics, I think there was something that came out, oh, probably 3 years ago now, if not longer. When you work at a university, time just seems to kind of like, because it's very cyclical fall, it just kind of
It
goes and blurs all together when you've been here for a while. But there had been something released, I think the ABA did it or something that where they looked at Harvard law grads. Now Harvard law grads are, you know, going to be able to work where they want for the most part as long as they do the right things, and so highly sought after. And they were looking at people who had left the profession 10, 15, 20 years out, and it's surprising the amount of attorneys who leave the profession. So I don't think it's a student legal services problem. In fact, I think student legal services probably has kept me in the profession when maybe I would have left, because I had a very stressful first legal job. Um, it also coincided with some family members passing away that I was very close to. It just was a really hectic 2.5 years during that time where I worked there, actually a little bit longer than that. And so I just was kind of burnt out. That was when I was doing the anxiety, needing to go to therapy, all that sort of stuff, and that really, really helped. But I just wasn't sure that I was going to stick with this. And when I came here, you sign up for your benefits, and one of the benefits you have to stay 8 years here to get. And I never thought that I'd still be here, at that time, coming from that background. 8 years. I'm in my ninth year. I just passed 9 years, so heading towards 9.5. So it's kept me around longer than maybe anything else would. So I think it's a profession problem. And I think some of the things we talked about, the pressure, mental health stigma, substance abuse, those are bigger problems, disparity in salaries, lack of professionalism. People who, there are judges and other opposing counsel who make things where there are times where it's just a very simple solution, or it's a very simple
Right.
thing. And I just had this happen here, and there was a mistake, and I'll admit to that. It was a miscommunication. Um, but it's a very simple thing. It could have been resolved in an easy way, and they made it a hard way. So, I just think that it's a bigger profession problem than just our small slice of it. Um, and it kind of touches on
It,
everything I talked about.
Thank you, Jamie. This is amazing. This three-parter, right, to collective wisdom. I think
Mm,
we just scratched the surface here. And I'm going to summarize very briefly. If there's any managers, or
okay.
admin listening, what the message I would give them to keep the attorneys and others happy: talk to them, listen to them, listen to their needs, their wants, right? And just, yeah, try to do that for ourselves, Jamie, and also
Mhm.
to resonate there. Not just the managers of the world and our students, but also we need to listen to ourselves. What you were telling us, right? What are our signals? What is our brain, telling us? What is our body telling us, right? Sometimes we gotta chill out. Sometimes we gotta relax, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we gotta find ourselves, and we got to find what helps us
Hmm.
cope, what helps us get through things. So
Hmm.
I wrote down everything here, and I'm kind of going through all of the important points here.
Oh,
Um,
uh,
how to keep student legal services attorneys happy. That's a bigger topic. We're gonna have to do that'll be our next part four, I think.
we'll have to do we'll I don't know, Layne will have to write for a grant, and we'll have to do a study of all, I don't know how many attorneys are in student legal services, and we'll do a empirical study. Maybe we'll need somebody from the academic side to come help us.
Right, right.
Because
I,
and our programs vary. Everything's different. Every person is different. All the circumstances are always different when you practice law in different states. There's different
I
concerns.
and that holistic thing, that functional law that
Yes.
you were talking about before,
Hmm.
every person's different. We got to
Hmm.
customize solutions, right?
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
themselves as well as us.
Yes, and yeah, and I think you know, um, w- when you, I think maybe not students, but when you get to be in your 30s, getting close to 40, you start to
I
you
was gonna say
know,
yes, 30s. Yeah,
30,
I'm
yeah,
there,
sure.
Jamie. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know how you have a kid that's gonna be going to UF, Layne. Like, you must have
Yeah.
really, um,
I know. It started
you
very,
know,
very young, right?
very
Clearly
young.
these dystopian problems weren't kicking in back in the day.
Well, believe it or not, someone I graduated from high school with just had her eldest graduate from high school, so that was a
Wow.
and she did not have the baby in high school, so it wasn't one of those. So it was like, "Oh, man." Um,
I
whew.
I think it's when you're looking at your grandchild entering college or entering, a career, that's when right? At that point. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're
you
right.
just you have to know yourself, and I think that really comes back to all of the advice I give to people who are going to law school. You know yourself, like, it's so hard. We do 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds such a disservice that you need to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
I know.
Um,
I know.
and because, it used to be you could get a college degree and you could go do anything, and people were like, you could change careers and do all of that sort of stuff. And I will tell you from experience that that is not the way it is anymore. Yes, there are jobs that if I want to leave the legal field, and like I said, plenty of attorneys do, that the JD helps. But it's not like there's a natural transition to anything else. And sometimes the JD is a liability. So, you really need to kind of be real with yourself, be realistic. There's nothing wrong with taking the LSAT and, hopefully maybe getting some waivers to apply to some law schools and seeing what
Yes.
financial package they offer you, and then kind
Right.
of decide, if that's going to work for you. But I really encourage people to take a little time between undergrad and law school. I know that's not the traditional wisdom, that you might lose the momentum or do something like that. And I think there's really some value about that. You learn, I changed so much between 21 when I graduated undergrad and 25
Oh
or
yeah.
24 when I
And
graduated law school. Um,
so maybe
that it's a huge thing.
a gap year is not a bad idea, right? Particularly undergrad to law school. My
Mhm.
students are always like, "Well, Layne, what if I'm in a job and I love the job?" And I'm like, "What's wrong with that?
If you
Continue
love
in
the
your job.
job, that is
Keep
the
going."
that
Yeah.
that is the goal. I mean, that is the goal, is to find a job that you love. So if you go out and you find a job that you love and it supports you, which I know sometimes is not necessarily, sometimes in certain things that are our passions, you get paid and dealing with the passion and not actually in cold hard cash. But I think that ultimately is the goal. I mean, I find it hard, for some of the things that I enjoy. I don't know if there would ever be like the job that I could be passionately in love with, but one that you like, one that fulfills your needs, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. That is what we all want. So, you know, taking the gamble, on something like that. Plus, you get seasoning, you get to know yourself. You can work for a while, save up some money from law school, minimize maybe the loans you'd have to take out for your living expenses. Um, there's
Yeah.
just some benefits to maybe thinking about trying out something. And it can be the silliest thing that then comes back around that helps you. I worked for a cable company briefly before, in between undergrad and law school. Believe it or not, there's things that I learned then that has come in handy when dealing with some of the issues that clients have.
No doubt. When we finish here, I'm going to ask you too about that
Yeah.
cable job in just a second here.
Oh.
Jamie, I
Mhm.
I cannot thank you enough. I send the bill over. We'll get John to to work right on that. Here, and
Mhm.
anything you ever need from our office, you are certainly always a very
Well,
welcome guest here. We got
uh,
to get you. We'll get you visiting. Okay,
yeah,
that'll be the
it's not
next.
it's not really all that far from where I live. I
No, we
live
came in. We came and saw you guys, right? So I
Yeah, you
mean, yeah,
did.
yeah, your
Maybe
team.
maybe if everything works out and we're not still under a travel ban, um, we'll think about it for this holiday break.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hint, hint, right? For the, the,
Hmm.
the budget control officers out there.
Yes.
Thank you, Jamie. And again, wonderful messages, and I cannot thank you enough. Wishing you all the best, and
Thank you.
UCF Student Legal Services all the best. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.